Confused about how to plan for your retirement? Shawn Maloney is here to help. Shawn has created the Retire Happy framework that considers more than just how much you should save. Getting information and tools to preserve your financial future is minutes away. Welcome to the Priority of Retirement with your host, Shawn Maloney.
Welcome to another episode of the Priority of Retirement, where we delve into all aspects of retirement planning for a happy retirement. Today, we're joined by Mark Hansen, a financial planner at Second Comma. Mark's journey to financial advising is far from conventional. He started in sales, project management, and even led in budgeting departments, only to realize his love for numbers wasn't quite enough. So what truly drives him is helping people make smart decisions about their financial future. We'll explore how just one simple email from HR pushed Mark out of his corporate world into the financial planning sector, where he now empowers clients in their 30s to prepare for the next 30 years of their lives. So, hey, Mark, welcome on. Appreciate you coming.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me on. I'm excited.
Yeah, man. So I love the aspect of people planning for the next 30 years. Obviously, we talk a lot on here about retirement planning and those kind of things, and so I'm anxious to talk about that a little bit as we get into the podcast and explore that a little bit. So I want to dive in a little bit about your background. People get to know you a little bit, right? So what was it about sales and project management that kind of left you kind of with that unsatisfied, um, you know, area, despite some of the success you had, what was it about that kind of left you hanging?
Yeah. When I think back on that, when you get a skill and you start honing it, sometimes you don't understand the consequences of that skill. And so in college, I remember they started introducing in our most advanced classes this really high level Excel stuff, and they were teaching us, pivot tables is kind of when you look at the grand scale of Excel, pivot tables is really towards the 101 level, but it comes across very crazy. But I started learning more and more about Excel. I was very interested. It's how my mind works. Things are categorized into rectangles, columns, and rows. That's exactly how I love it. Excel just had that on a screen. And so play that through my entire career. I got better and better and better and better at Excel, which made me better and better and better at solving problems, performing analysis, which elevated me up the ranks at these companies. I was able to solve problems and perform analysis better, faster than other people. And that put me into specific roles. And the unintended consequence was by the time I get to my finals, corporate job, my job all day, while being highly compensated and with the title that is amazing to have on your name tag, I was just staring at my computer screen all day long.
Yeah.
And that was my job. My job was not to talk to people or interface or tell jokes or anything like that. And after a while, I realized how lonely that was. Me in my office with my window view from the 14th floor, staring at a 36-inch monitor. This is actually really unfulfilling.
Right. I get it. I totally get it. I love that story. The reason I asked that is, and with people that we work with, and we're both advisors, so I love having other advisors on, just kind of shooting about the industry and whatnot. But what we talk a lot about with our clients is like, hey, look, before we ever dive into the financial world of things, we have this Retire Happy framework, but we're gonna talk about what makes you happy, right? I mean, what do you want to do in retirement that's gonna make you happy? Well, that really can start earlier in your, like, to your point, you can start earlier on, right? So many people don't do what they're meant to do, or don't do what makes them happy in a job. So I love talking to people that break away and find that, right? It's always
Yes.
great to find that earlier in your career than later, right?
Yeah. Well, and like from the rest of my story, it felt almost kind of forced on me towards the end there, which we we can cover that part if you want to.
Well, yeah, I was going to ask you about. So I heard a little bit about what's the whole thing behind the HR email that you received, and what made you rethink your whole career based off an email.
Yeah, so I'm sitting in my office with the view and the monitor and doing the Excel, the rows and the
Right.
columns, and word kind of got around. I guess people just had thoughts. Yeah, I was running a budgeting department that had dollar signs, writing budgets from $500,000 up to $70 million for hotel renovations. And so I think the assumption that some people had was, well, if Mark can handle a $70 million budget, maybe he can handle my household budget where we're trying to to put the money where we want it to go. So people would come into my office, and I had learned from my dad actually. He was with a totally different company. It was a startup. He was there with the owner, and people would come into his office and ask him questions about retiring and how he was planning for retirement, and they thought he was really good at stewarding his money. And I thought, oh, well, this is just what you do when you like your coworkers and they have questions about money, you help them. And so, yeah, come on in, close it, let's talk. And so I was helping people with their finances, just kind of, budgets. How do we handle household cash flow? And I thought nothing of it. And then one day this email comes in, and it's from the director of HR, and it says, whoever's giving financial planning advice to their fellow employees needs to stop immediately. And I think they actually knew who it was. I think they were just writing it in HR speak to pretend like they didn't know who it was. Because I basically read that email and said, Mark, stop doing these things.
Right, right.
Yeah. And what was interesting is I had just interviewed a financial planner previously who I'd met at church in a men's Bible study. And
Right,
he had stopped me halfway through that interview. And he said, Mark, you should be a financial planner. You'd be great at this. Right. And I'm
right.
thinking, well, no, I just got this job. I just landed the next promotion. I just got the next pay raise. I just got like I said at the beginning, the 36-inch monitor with the 14th
Yeah.
floor window seat. I was like, I don't want to give that up. But then this email comes through from HR, and I was like, oh, it can't be much clearer than this. I'm in the wrong profession.
Right, right. That's fantastic. Well, sometimes it takes unconventional things or things that you don't expect to move the needle, right? And
Yes.
move us out. We get in our comfort zones, and I love that. I love that story. I can relate to it a little bit, right? I mean, I, I I've been doing this for in the financial world probably over 20 years, but I had other prior to being 100% financial advisor and retirement planning and whatnot. I worked in corporate world more in the finance technology space, before really diving 100% into this. And it was really different things that lined up. And I truly believe God orchestrated certain things in certain ways and put different people in my path and had certain things take place to make that leap of faith to jump out and do this full time, which is really
Yeah.
what I love doing. And it sounds like, similar to you, jumping out and being able to do which that makes where your talents are, what makes more sense and what makes you happy, right?
Yes. Yes. That's if you step back and you look at the plan, it feels like a plan. Yeah. When you see how your life plays out, it feels like a plan when you look back at a grand enough scale. Absolutely.
Right. Yeah. So, I mean, I know that could be a tough decide, tough decision when you have a career and you're successful and you're going. So, what ultimately, you had that email, but what really, you know, made you choose the family, chose family over work? Did you have that tough decision where it was presented, that really outside of your, the other circumstances? Was there any other factors that really pushed you over the edge there?
Yeah, I was talking to my wife at one point, and this was a lot of this timeline took place during that very special time in history where we all got sent home for a period of time, and it was during that time we had had our first son, and I had never really spent a significant uninterrupted time with him for weeks and weeks and weeks. I was always going to work, home on the weekends, home in the evenings, but going to work. And for a period of time there, it wasn't like that. And I was home a lot, and I just really fell in love with him, fell in love with my son in a way that I hadn't before. And at the same time, there comes this knock on my corporate world that says, "Hey, get ready, put your seatbelt on. We're ready for your next promotion. We're ready to take you up the ladder." And I was told it was a year I was not gonna forget, as in we're about to go to the big leagues. And I was talking to my wife, and I said, if I take this job, you'll never see me. I'll never be home. If I am home and the phone rings, I'm gonna have to answer it. And we just had a really great conversation back and forth and said, that's actually not what we want. And had I not had the time at home to, capture my son's first moments walking on video and to be spending that uninterrupted sequential time with him, I might have chosen something different.
Sure.
But again, looking back at what feels like a plan in my life, I'm glad that I got home to see him, to fall in love with him in a way that I'd never done before, to
Right.
make my choice really, really clear when it came time. Even though that was a big knock, with I'm assuming a lot of great things attached to it. It didn't have the
Sure.
thing that I wanted.
Right. That's a great story. I love that. And it really, it's obviously it speaks to priorities and it speaks to, where your heart is, right? And I love hearing those kind of stories when people get to that point earlier in their life and earlier in their
Yeah.
careers than later on. And, you drudge through and miserable and, and it affects everybody else around you. So it's making that a priority, right? I mean, and choosing what makes you happy early on in life. Um, and, to our listeners, it's the same kind of thing as you're getting, further along into retirement as well. When you're planning for that, you got to be thinking forward of what do you want that to look like, right? And here's an opportunity. If you didn't make that change earlier in your life, here's an opportunity to kind of reset, right? And
Yeah.
figure out what that's going to look like. What's that second half of your journey going to look like after you put those that time clock behind you? What's going to make you happy, right? It's making that a
Yes.
priority, right? Putting yourself above work and putting yourself and your family above other things. That's fantastic. I love it. Absolutely love it. Well, I know you specialize, in working with a little bit younger clients. So your whole thing about working with clients in their 30s so they can focus on the next 30 years. So what's unique about that? What have you seen in that space? What challenges come about that? And what have you seen in, working with a little bit younger generations and with financial planning and getting ready?
Yeah. Well, you'll be familiar with this with your clients is when the when the next impending step is retirement or punching the time clock that we want to stop punching, it kind of forces the conversation. And then it's mathematically, does this line up or does it not line up? And that's maybe the biggest gate stepping into retirement. The problem I run into sometimes is retirement. Yeah, it's 30 years down the road. It's way
Yeah,
down there. You know,
yeah,
if I look real hard and shade my eyes, I might kind of
right.
think about seeing retirement,
We get the
And
telescope
that
out.
sometimes yeah, get the telescope out. That's a great one. Yeah, I'm gonna start using that. I love that. It's sometimes it's hard to get these people these families. I don't mean to say that sounded weird, but it's hard to for someone who's got let's call it two kids, maybe a third one on the way. They've got household expenses. They've got a runny nose over here. They got Cheerio crumbs over there.
Yep.
We've got to go to work because we've got to keep this money machine in motion. Someone staying at home with the family, providing for the family emotionally and physically and all those things. And it's, uh, yeah, in the middle of that, when are you going to stop and get out your telescope and look 30 years down the road to figure out your plan for retirement? Some people aren't ready to do that or don't have the time or just don't care because other priorities are screaming at them. And that doesn't change the fact that time is marching on, that the timeline to retirement is getting shorter, that the maybe the necessity to save for retirement up front to allow compounding interest to do the heaviest lifting for you in those later years. All those things are taking place even while a family is busy and distracted possibly by good things, right? They're not distracted by bad things. But it's trying to the thing that I bump up against the most is trying to help people see this is happening, whether you pay attention to it or not. And so
Yeah,
the big schism in my book of business, who becomes a client, is people understand that this is happening and they want to do something about it, or they're not ready to reorganize their priorities to spend a little bit of time putting that intention into their finances.
100%, 100%. I know, a lot of our clients and a lot of people we talk to, a lot of people put it off. To your point, they kick it down the road because they have other priorities, and then a lot of times you find yourself later in life and you're in your 50s and you're going through different milestones. Last kids graduate high school or college, or have grandbabies, or whatever it is, and you have that oh crap moment that, oh, it's here. Wait a minute. We got to get going. And now what I like to tell people is that, you're having to sacrifice more by putting it off, right? Because you're in catch up mode and you have to sacrifice other things so you can put more aside. And so kind of the flip side of that is for you when you work with younger folks, what's the opportunity cost, right? Okay, you're what's the opportunity cost of not making that a priority? And it's easier. You don't have to sacrifice as much when you start younger. So I love your message. 'Cause we always obviously encourage people to start younger. It's not as painful.
It's not as painful. That's great.
But a little bit aside now instead of having to sacrifice and put these big chunks aside, later. And how like you said, that compounding effect is just enormous.
Yeah, I recorded an episode in my podcast recently talking to these younger families, and I in there I said this line about waiting to start saving for retirement is the most expensive thing you can do,
Yeah.
just from a purely mathematical perspective, because compound interest, the last year of compound interest before we start changing the balances in the accounts, right? The last untouched year is the greatest potential of growth from compound interest. And so when you delay retirement by a year, that's the year you're sacrificing. You're not sacrificing the first year. You're always sacrificing the last year, and the last year is always potentially the biggest year. And when I start reframing it for people like that, it's like every time you delay year one, you sacrificed the biggest year. You delay again, you sacrificed the biggest year. And it's people start hearing that, and that's maybe the most helpful reframing that I've developed recently to help these young families. It's not this impending, here comes an asteroid, you've got to make a decision by Tuesday. It's not like that. You have to get your telescope out just to see it. But if you use your telescope, if you understand the math behind getting to retirement, you're always sacrificing your biggest compound growth year, or the potential of it, and that has really helped people here recently of just getting a different mindset.
Yeah, no, that's a great way to look at it. It's just it's so funny. I mean, it's we all work, to get to that point, to have that freedom of retirement. But our judgment and our eyes get a little cloudy because of all the other life happens in the way. And I totally get it. We've all been there, right? Life's busy, life happens, and it's hard to see into the future sometimes. But you kind of have to remind ourselves every once in a while, what are we working for, right? Well, we're working for our families. We're working to hopefully at some point where we don't have to, um,
Yep.
you know, plan ahead. Then maybe that's a little bit sooner than later, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And I say retirement. It's hard again to conceptualize what is it. So I talk about it in very broad topics because that's the only way to talk about it when you're 30 years out from retirement. But it's what do you want to do? When do you want to do it? Who do you want to do it with? And where do you want to do it? That's
Yeah,
about as broad as I can think about it in. But those categories give people, I want to be close to the grandbabies. Okay, that's great. That's very helpful, right? I want to do it with my family. Okay, very, very helpful details. I want to do it as soon as possible. Okay, like that's not a date, but that's very helpful information.
you got to paint that vision, ahead of time,
Yes,
right? Got to start
exactly.
dreaming early.
Yes, yes.
Well, I love it. And I know, you've made that change in career and you're doing things that you're more passionate about. What's been more fulfilling for you doing this versus what you did in the past?
Oh man, the the meetings where I'm sitting, and I'm kind of envisioning it right now. When I'm sitting with a client, I do all my meetings virtual. I'm trying to meet my clients where they are. Virtual
Yeah.
helps that. So we're sitting across the screen from each other, and I see that light bulb turn on. They came into the meeting. They didn't understand it. How are we going to save up for the house? How are we going to pay for college? How are we ever going to stack these dollars together to get to this big number that we need for retirement or car payment or whatever? And when that light bulb turns on and they can't turn it back off,
Right.
that right there has been so fulfilling. Because then I've taken their biggest unknown, I've taken their biggest question mark, their biggest everything's gray, and I've tried to make it a little more black and white for them. And it's a little easier for them to operate in. And it's showing them, hey, these are big questions that maybe need big solutions, but that doesn't mean that they're impossible. And when you
Right.
start reducing that, you start taking down their mental load because those are things people are carrying with them everywhere. And it affects
Yeah.
everything that they do, from how they sleep to what they eat to how they treat their family or their coworkers and everybody
Yeah.
in between. And you start reducing that mental load because you turn on a light bulb for somebody. I mean, that's life change. And
Yeah.
I've really, really enjoyed that, working with my clients.
I love that. Yeah, 100%. Because doing this, like you said, can be life changing for people and gives them a sense of relief. We all worry about money, or most people worry about money. There's emotional tie to your own money, but one, getting third party objective looks at it, when you're sharing things that sometimes you don't see when you're in the weeds. And I tell people as well. I said, look, hey, I'm a financial advisor, been doing this for a very long time, right? But yet, financial advisors still need someone on the side to keep their emotions in check. We all have mentors, we all have different things. It's the same thing. Our emotional, everybody has that emotional tie to money, and sometimes you need those breakthrough moments to show other aspects of it, and to give them that peace of mind, right? That's what it's about. I love that. 100%.
Yep. Yes.
So if you had to share something, what would you want our audience to take away? What would you most like to would want to share to our customers, to our clients and our audience out here today about financial planning, retirement planning, your messaging? Uh, what's the biggest impact statement you can make here?
I think, proximity doesn't change. We kind of talked about it, but proximity to retirement doesn't change the importance or the scale of retirement. And like you said, trying to weave those two things together, starting today can be less painful. And starting today doesn't mean, okay, we're not having fun for the next 30 years so we can save for retirement. Most people that I've worked with have, when that gray becomes black and white and they understand how a little bit done, the kind of the long, slow obedience of financial planning. If you do a little bit for a long time, that's when people realize, oh, maybe this is obtainable. Maybe we can do this. Maybe we can, uh, you know, look at the household spending, free up X number of dollars, direct it into these accounts. And if we just do that for the next, okay, 30 years, that gets us on this path towards retirement. Most of the time, when you sit down and you crunch the numbers, because humans are not very good at compounding math. So if you use a calculator to tell you what does the compounding math look like, where does it start, how do you keep that engine running, it becomes at least very concrete. And even if you have a good answer or a bad answer, it doesn't matter what the answer is. You have an answer. What was gray is now black and white. And that's really, really helpful when it comes to getting your finance or even deciding if you're ready to take action on your finances. When you've got that answer, then you can have an informed decision with your spouse about, hey, are we ready to tackle this?
Right. Yeah. And I like that, and I like the fact that there's some intangible things there. We talked a little bit about emotions and opportunity costs, those kind of things. But when those light bulbs go off and people, see the movement of their actions, that if they start earlier, what impact that has. There's a bunch of intangible things there as well, right? I mean, there's those happy factors, there's those emotions that can be freed up to envision what that looks like, and it just makes that whole journey a little bit smoother when you
Yeah.
can start realizing, hey, this is a real possibility. We can put a plan together and take baby steps, and you take those. The sooner you start, the smaller steps have to be, and it makes that journey a little bit smoother, right? It's not,
Yeah.
that
Yeah.
mountain's not quite as steep.
Yeah, I was in another podcast. I was talking like it's kind of like going on a long road trip, and I said, if you leave or if you leave late on your long road trip, or you discover in your road trip that you are behind schedule, it's from that moment through the end of the road trip is a totally different level of stress, And the contrast is, what if we left early? What if we realized we weren't going to be late, and we could keep that different demeanor on this long road trip? That sounds great. What doesn't sound great, if I think I can answer for the audience, is, oh my gosh, we're going to be 45 minutes late. Now we have to speed for the next 6 hours to attempt to not be 45 minutes late. That's not a fun 6 hours.
Right. That's a little bit stressful. See, there's a reason your parents threw you in the car on vacation at 4 o'clock in the morning instead of waiting until later today.
Yes,
It's
yes,
very
there's a
relatable, the
method
same
to
kind
the
of thing.
madness. Method to the madness. That's right.
That's right. That's right. Well, man, it's been a pleasure having you on. I appreciate you coming on here. Oh, whoa, sorry about that. My cat is getting in the way. Get out of the way there. Appreciate you coming on. Guys, we're going to post all this information, how you can contact Mark and all his information out on the show notes with the podcast, as well as on YouTube. Man, I really appreciate you having on, guys. It's uh, always here to make a priority for your retirement, make the journey smooth, and here's to aligning your future to a happy retirement. We'll catch you all on the next episode.
Thanks for listening to The Priority of Retirement with Shawn Maloney. If you enjoyed the show, check out our reviews on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. For more free resources to help with your retirement journey, go to retirewisepro.com or check the link in the show notes. You can also download a free copy of Shawn's book, The Priority of Retirement, or reach out to discuss working with him directly at retirewisepro.com. Thanks for listening.
Insurance products offered through the insurance business RetireWise LLC. RetireWise LLC is also an investment advisory practice that offers products and services through AE Wealth Management LLC, AEWM, a registered investment advisor. AEWM does not offer insurance products. The insurance products offered by RetireWise LLC are not subject to investment advisor requirements. Investing involves risk, including the potential loss of principal. Any references to protection, safety, or lifetime income generally refer to fixed insurance products, never securities or investments. Insurance guarantees are backed by the financial strength and claims-paying abilities of the insuring carrier. This podcast intended for informational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as the sole basis for financial decisions, nor should it be construed as advice designed to meet the particular needs of an individual's situation. RetireWise LLC is not permitted to offer, and no statement made during the show shall constitute tax or legal advice. Our firm is not affiliated with or endorsed by the U.S. government or any governmental agency. The information and opinions contained herein provided by third parties have been obtained from sources believed to be reliable, but accuracy and completeness cannot be guaranteed by RetireWise LLC. Guests of the Priority of Retirement are not affiliated with, nor do they endorse Shawn Maloney or RetireWise LLC.